How's it going, everybody? Jared Johnson. We are here at the 2021 National BEI Conference. I'm sitting down today with Ashley Micciche. She is the owner of True North Retirement Advisors. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the preconceived notions that owners have when they walk into her office to talk about planning, as well as how to really build some clarity for those owners who may not have a direction, right? So Ashley and I were chatting just before this, and she says, Jared, what I thought folks were going to ask me and bring to the table is very different than what they actually bring to the table. So Ashley, let's talk about that. So owners come to you, and let's start with the ones who may not know where they want to go. Mm-hmm. What are you hearing, and what did you think you were going to hear when you got into this crazy exit planning game? Was it been 4 years, 3 years now?
Yeah. So I'm continually surprised at the variety of lack of clarity in where owners want to go. And a lot of times they're really just overwhelmed because they're weighing a lot of different options at the same time. And they don't have a framework for thinking through that and what's ideal in their situation.
Yeah.
And it's very complex as far as who are you going to transfer your business to. And so I thought when I started doing exit planning that there would be a clear path that would be laid out before I ever entered the picture in that owner's mind. This is where I want to go. And so, but more often than not,
it's Johnny. Yeah. Or Sarah's been working her tail off. She's going to buy it from me. And your job is just to find the best path, right? Or find the way to help them execute.
Yes. And I find it's a real source of frustration for a lot of my business owner clients because they don't have that clarity of, this is definitely the person who I really want to transfer my business to. And then there's other aspects of that. Well, I have these maybe 2 or 3 key employees. They're getting closer to retirement too. And maybe someone who's younger, who could be in this for longer, could be an owner, just doesn't have the skill set, or they don't even want that.
Right.
And then they're just like, I don't know what am I going to do? And no one in their family wants to take over the business. And maybe they may or may not have the frame or the foundation in place to do something like a ESOP, and then they're like, I don't even know if I can sell my business, who would want to buy this?
Who wants to buy this, right?
They're just so overwhelmed. And so we have to end up doing a lot of work in the initial phases of just figuring out what's plan A.
Yeah. So talk to me about that, because you mentioned 2 things that I really want to hit on. One is the framework. That's kind of the first thing that we talk about. They don't have a framework. They don't really understand what the options are or how they can get there. Or, I got key employees, but they're on their way out too. We got a young lady who's in the business, but she doesn't quite have the ownership chops and may not want to develop them. So when clients come to you and say, hey, I have no idea. What's your framework? How do you help guide them through that path? So to find plan A, to find plan B?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Sometimes, so where I start is I eliminate the options that we know are just not a good fit. So we can at least narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3 different options and then go from there and refine it from there. Sometimes what I've done recently that I think is really helpful is I'll ask a business owner client, if I put a gun to your head today and said you had to choose this, what would you pick? And sometimes it really leads them to go down a path where it's like, oh, yeah, I guess maybe this is truly the best fit.
Right.
And so when you frame it in that, I have to make a decision right now today, what would I do? Okay, I'm gonna pursue a third party sale because there's just too many things that have to fall into place perfectly.
Much junk over here that we got to deal with.
Yeah, or like their timeline necessitates a third party transfer, and the timeline dictates a lot of where we go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in exit planning, for our listeners who are just joining, right? There's third-party sales, there's insider transfers as we think about them, management, buyouts, give away to the kids, certainly transferring out of state planning. From the transitions and the exit plans that you've worked through, let's talk a little bit about timing, because we always tell folks, if you want to go third party and you want to get some money out of it, and your timeline's short, you better have a really great business.
Right.
Right. So talk to me about some of the differences between third party and inside transfer timelines that you've seen and deals that you've worked or helped business owners approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in some regards, the insider transfer can take a lot longer based on how much they've groomed the successor owners and management. Do they even have a management team in place? So a third party transition, that can be very quick if they have a very great business. Well,
it can be quick if they don't have a great business. They're just not going to get what they want, right?
Exactly. We'll give you pennies on the dollar. I'll take it. Yeah.
Just go on.
Yeah. What's fun about it is that it is different in every circumstance and every business, and the path and what that third party transition looks like.
Cool. No, it's great. No, you mentioned, so it's I always love talking to you. So you say it's fun. And I really believe dealing with these owners and helping them find clarity is a ton of fun. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about something that may not be as much fun. And maybe it's great fun for you, but as somebody who's pretty stubborn himself, what happens when a business owner walks in and says, Ashley, this is what I'm doing with my business. Here's how I want to get out. And you look at that situation and you're like, there's no freaking way. Mm-hmm. This is not going to happen this way. How do you approach those situations? And owners who have, I've got a buddy of mine who has a small tech firm, and everybody thinks, well, if I want to transfer to an insider, it's got to be an ESOP, right? If they don't really understand planning. He's like, Jared, I really want to do an ESOP. I said, dude, you got 5 people who work for you. You make good money, but you want to spend, 20, 30 grand in valuations every year to get this done, right? So talk about some of those situations.
An ESOP, I think, is a great example because outside of a very clear path, it's probably the most frequent path that an owner comes to me and says, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then I have to say, okay, well, let's look at this. And the nice thing is with ESOPs, there is a set of criteria that says you're a good candidate for an ESOP or not.
Right.
And so sometimes, they might be a little stubborn. And I like ESOPs. I've also seen them fall apart. Yep. My husband is actually a CPA and has worked with several ESOPs that have just imploded.
Yeah.
And he's a CPA, so he's very cautious by nature too. So he's like, ESOPs, they better be the best fit.
It's got to really hit all the buttons, right?
Yes. So, but I think a lot of owners, they've heard other people talk about it, or they've heard of ESOPs going fantastically well.
Right.
And they know of some of the tax benefits of doing the ESOP. And so they come and they say, and they like the idea of the employee ownership after they leave. So there's a lot of cultural reasons, the tax benefits, it hits a lot of the, I guess, objectives and goals that an owner might have in exiting. But a lot of, especially small businesses like the one you were talking about, where it just, from a financial standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. It's going to deplete the value of the business just keeping this thing operational.
Right. So talking about, and again, look, BEI is a big proponent of ESOPs when they fit, right? We always tell folks, we don't really care how a business owner wants to leave. We just want to help them accomplish their goals. Mm-hmm. So what are some of those goals or how do you help a business owner really uncover the goals that they have and develop that right plans? Because again, they like employee ownership. Mm-hmm. They like some of the tax benefits. Well, you probably know 3 or 4 or 5 ways to hit those same objectives without doing an ESOP. right? Leverage management buyout. There's, transition to key people. Shoot, in some instances, giving the business away to children, but
or their employees if
or
they want.
Yeah, sure.
If they want, who cares?
Maybe that's legal. I don't know. So talking about how you uncover goals and really help a business owner shape what they're looking to do.
Yeah, good question. So most of the time when someone is motivated enough to actually do an exit plan, they've got a pretty strong pain point. And it usually comes down to, I'm ready to retire.
Yeah.
I really want to retire as quickly as as I can.
It's possible, right?
So the timeline, I think most people actually start with the timeline. They say, okay, I want to retire no more than 2 years and I'm out. I can't do this anymore. I'm being pulled in different directions, grandkids, or just they've been head down running their business for 30 years and they're just done.
Yeah. They look up and they're 65 or 70, right? Like,
yeah.
I started this thing when I was a kid. And now I'm not going to say old because our audience will get mad at me, but
they've got a few gray hairs.
They've got a few gray hairs.
Yeah.
I have a few gray hairs. So timeline is kind of the first thing. So let's hit timeline. If folks, and I know we kind of talked about third-party sale here, but if folks really have a desire to transition to employees, or have a leverage buyout of some sort, what do you see as kind of the ideal timeline? So somebody comes to you, I'm burnt. I am 2 years. I got to be done. One, how does that make you feel as an advisor? And two, when should people be calling you and saying, hey, listen, I got to think about this now?
Yeah, I kind of parrot the BEI advice around this.
Yeah. Let's do
Which is, the more time that you give yourself, the earlier you start. Now, 20 years from exit, you're just not going to be motivated enough.
Their plan's going to change 40 times in 20 years, right?
Yeah, but I find that 5 to 7 years is a sweet spot because you can do a lot in that time period. And there's not 2 years to me. I get a little stressed out just thinking about that, especially with, an insider transfer, an ESOP or something, because it's just, there's a lot of things that already need to be in place. And maybe you have to backtrack and maybe you don't have the right systems and processes in place, or maybe you're still way too involved in the day-to-day. And if you accelerate your removal from that too quickly, then it can, harm the business in a substantial way. Yeah. So 5 to 7 years is ideal. There's a lot you can do in that time period. 2 years, I get a little.
We better start calling good business brokers in that 2 year range, right?
Exactly. And have a ready buyer.
Pretty this thing up, find a ready buyer, and let's get the highest price we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
good.
Is great for, if they can do that.
Yeah, it's fantastic, right? But sometimes it doesn't hit their we call them values-based goals, right? I want to leave a legacy. I've been working with Ashley for 20 years, and I want her to have the business, right? She's, so let's talk. I want to kind of bring this to a head with exit planning, and we've talked about this at this conference. We've talked about this over cocktail. Sometimes exit planning is a 4-letter word for business owners. Let's talk about
which 4-letter word are you speaking of, Jared?
I'm going to plead the fifth, Ashley. Thank you very much. Exit. That's the 4-letter word on that one. But no, so we help business owners. You help business owners plan for the future. And whether you want to call it succession planning, whether you want to call it exit planning, whether you want to call it just good old common sense business planning, talk to me about some of the things that exit planning has opened up for you in your practice, some additional areas to work with business owners, and then also let's end on a win. Maybe it wasn't a full-blown exit plan, but a business owner came to you and said, hey, I need some help. and you were able to help them accomplish a goal that maybe they wouldn't have gotten to had they not come to you initially for some kind of planning work.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So the first question.
I know I threw a lot at you. I'm sorry.
My memory is so short. I have 3 young kids, and so I don't.
They're all over, right? All right. So let's see if I can remember it. Talk to me about some opportunities that planning work has opened up in your practice.
So, well, actually, I have a question for you to kind of kick that off. How many CEXPs are practicing right now?
Oh, practicing planning or hold the designation?
Hold the designation that are still working.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to throw a number out. Let's not fact check just yet. What I would say is last year we put about 125 people through the program last year alone. Because I'm not technically responsible for who is keeping their designation up and going. I would say at the moment we have about 350 to 400 active, allowed to call themselves CEXPs because they have done all their CE and stayed in practice.
Okay, so that right there is a very powerful differentiator, because I can honestly say to clients who come in the door, a prospective client, there are only a few hundred people in the entire country that do what I can do for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I started exit planning because really early on in my career, I was doing 401k plans, and I fell into that completely by accident. And so what I found is that I had pretty quickly, I started working with about 20, 25 401k plans, ramped that up from like 0 to that number in about 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
And so what I found is that most of these businesses, they had maybe 10 to 100 employees, low kind of 7-figure to 8-figure revenue. And none of them pretty much across the board were addressing the elephant in the room, which was their business, this highly valuable asset that was going to be an essential piece. And they were just keeping their head down, working in their business and not doing anything. And then I had a client who died of a heart attack very unexpectedly. Oh. And I watched what happened to his business, his family. His wife, who was a retired school teacher, actually had to come in and run the business. And she had never had any involvement in the business prior to that. Now, luckily, they had a management team that could function pretty well, but they ended up selling for significantly less than what the business was worth when he was around to a competitor who then came in and laid off all of these longer term employees, most of whom were late in their career. I don't know if you've known anyone who's tried to switch careers or change jobs late in their 50s, early 60s.
Actually, I'm holding on to everything I have at BEI because I hit 40 next year and I'm not looking for another job.
Yeah, it's
tough.
So it had this devastating ripple effect. And so that was actually the catalyst to start doing exit planning. That was about 7 years ago. So I started to have more of these conversations like, hey, what are we going to do? We're doing your 401k. A lot of times I was managing their personal assets, but what about your business?
Yeah.
And so that really led to going deeper down this path. And I realized I didn't even know that exit planning was a thing. And I thought, well, you bring in maybe your CPA and they can do some of this stuff over here, and your attorney will do some other stuff. But really, most business owners are going to need somebody at the helm of all of that to manage the entire process. And I really, because my background is in planning, I'm well suited to it. Like I joke, if I'm planning a birthday party for one of my kids, I have like a 30-point checklist of all the things.
I don't think that's a joke, by the way. I would.
It's crazy.
I'd put money on the table that is actually a real thing that you do.
Yeah. It's on my phone. I'll show it to you. Yeah. And so I like figuring out and prioritizing what we're going to do. And so it just fitted naturally in my practice. And it's a huge differentiator, especially as a background as a financial advisor. Every financial advisor, there's like 300,000 financial advisors. Okay. And most of them do wealth management and some planning. and maybe they sell some insurance, and they all talk the same, and they have the same value proposition. But as exit planning for business owners, it's a completely different value proposition that they're going to have a really hard time finding somewhere else.
Yeah.
So,
There is a lot of noise in the marketplace, but to your point, and we've said it right, it's a real key differentiator. There are hundreds of thousands of financial planners out there. There are, I would say, with our group, we've got about 400 firms at BEI. We support about 2,500 advisors. Like I said, there are about 350 to 400 who have taken the additional designation steps that you've taken. And listen, we're rigorous, right? It's 120 hours. You had to do 2 cases. You put some work in to do that. Mm-hmm. And that differentiation is key. But I think the most important part that I want our listeners, our folks who watch this to know is it's really about Ashley's process. And it's really about how you can captain the ship. Right? You got somebody at the helm. We're going to start every time I see you now. It's going to be Captain Ashley. I'm going to get you a hat. I'm going to get you a hat, Ashley. Absolutely.
I really want a hat.
Yeah, good. Let's end on a win for a client. Let's something from a planning situation that had you not talked to them about planning for the future, had you not said, "Hey, I can do this too," maybe they would have. Gosh, I hate hearing about the client like you just had. Or not just had, but had a heart attack, and the wife had to come in. And God, my wife would kill me a second time if something happened to me and she had to come run the business. She would literally would dig me up and do it all over again if that happened. So it's challenging, but let's end on a win. Let's hit me a high note.
Well, yeah. So what comes to mind first? I had a client last year, kind of an unfortunate situation. He ended up accelerating his retirement because of COVID. So he had some risk factors related to COVID and the business and the nature of the business. It just was something that he was going to retire in a couple of years anyways, and he had 2 other business partners. So he sold his shares to the 2 other business partners. Okay. And this was the plan all along. So everything was in place to do that. It was just the timeline was like, oh, we're going to do this now instead of 2 years. So it worked out for him, and the business did so well that they were going to, do that transition and then the payout of his portion of the ownership over, I think it was 3 or 5 years. And then the business ended up having a really good year during COVID. And so he was able to get accelerated payments on that. And so now that COVID is waning, he actually is now an employee of this business.
Wow. Okay.
And so he gets to have the best of both worlds. Yeah. He gets to do what he was doing before, but on his own schedule. And he has grandkids, and him and his wife, they love to travel. And so they've, COVID has kind of put a
little
crimp
dipper
in
on that, right?
Yeah. But so he jokes that he failed at retirement because his intention was not to go back so soon.
Right.
But he found that he just really wanted to stay active, just not as an owner anymore. And so he achieved all of the financial objectives and everything, and he still gets to work at a place where he has meaning and purpose and value. And there's a lot of, this is like probably a whole other podcast episode, but like the value and meaning that comes from work.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of owners don't realize how much of their identity is wrapped up in them as an owner. So it was kind of this negative thing at first because he's like, speaking of a ship, he was a rudderless ship. And then he realized, I can just go back to doing what I was doing before, but in a different role, in a different capacity. And it was a huge win for him and the business because they still benefit from him too being there.
So he had a plan in place. Because it was well designed and thought out, he was able to move it faster, which is benefiting him. And then at the end of the day, when he was like, "Gosh, what am I doing?" Right? His wife says, "Why are you here and not at work?" He gets to go back and be involved in an organization that he created or helped build and grow. and gets to gain that purpose. So I'm going to hold you to another podcast at some point on understanding an owner's identity and what's wrapped up in the business. But I love hearing the story about this owner who was able to accomplish his target of exit in a timeline that had to be shifted because of the planning work that you guys had done, and then was able to return and have some purpose in the business elsewhere. And Ashley, I mean, that's why we plan.